Welcome everyone to our first Pride Table Talks. My name is Deborah Porta. I'm the Executive Director of Pride Northwest. We are in a partnership with this program, is a partnership between Pride Northwest, GLAPN, formerly known as the Gay and Lesbian Archives of the Pacific Northwest, and Zami Nobla, an organization, the new Portland chapter, serving Black lesbian women. Today, I am super excited to be joined by Wanda Broadous, who is the description given to me, a Black lesbian performer, philanthropist, and all-around powerhouse in Portland's Black community. Welcome, Wanda.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Really appreciate you joining us, and I'm really honored to be able to have this conversation.
Thank you.
The Pride Table Talks are basically a combination of interview conversation. It's we're hoping for a fairly casual atmosphere to really have a conversation and for folks to be able to share their stories so that we can add it to our history. For particularly GLAPN and Pride Northwest, we are committed to ensuring that the voices of the people who have truly brought our community forward are known, recorded, and remembered. And that's really the driving impetus behind this project. And we're super excited to get started. Wanda, before we move into a broader conversation about your many accomplishments and community impact, could you maybe share just a little bit about your own coming out story? What was that like for you?
Oh, it was pretty simple. I worried about it more than it was complicated. Uh, I have a father and a mother and four right now, brothers and sisters, and it just was a lot going on all the time, and I was just trying to find my place always. It just seemed like I was always trying to find a place to fit in with my sisters and my brothers, and it I didn't know what was going on, but I knew it was something happening to me, and my interest in things were different than my brothers and sisters. I knew that. So I was always wondering, was there something wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
And I think all gays go through that. Is there something wrong with me? Why is this happening? Or why aren't I feeling these emotions? And I always wondered that until I got in high school. And then I knew that it was something different going on. I had a good feeling about the girls that were in the hallway, and the girls that I talked with, and the girls I knew. I knew I had more interest in that than I had in the boys that I was beating up and wrestling with, and
Right.
because I always had to prove that I was good enough. I just felt like I had to be good enough, and I didn't know what that was even. But I just had to be good at something because my dad, he was a good dude, and everybody loved my dad, and I wanted to be just like my dad. I wanted everybody to love me. I wanted to be a good person. I wanted to do good things, and I wanted to have lots of friends, and I wanted to just be a person that people could talk to uh and like. And I just always felt that. So when I decided to finally tell my parents that I was strange, then I told my dad first. And my dad, all he wanted to know was I happy? He said, "Well, are you happy?" and I was taken back because I was like, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Well, that's all I've ever wanted for you is for you to be happy." And I was like, wow, that's all? And he said, that's all I ever wanted. And so I told my mom, I said, oh, well, this would be easy. I'm going to tell mom. So I went and told my mom. And my mom said, well, I knew it was something about you because you always wanted to wear them pants. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, I knew it was something, but I didn't know what it was. But okay, then. That was it. That's all either one of them ever said. I told my brothers and my sisters, and they seemed to be okay with it. Uh, it was like, okay, all right, okay. But I don't think they ever knew any gay people. You know, uh, they were in the church. We were all in the church, and they were all straight, and they heard about gay, but they didn't really know about it
Mm-hmm.
and what it entailed or nothing. But I remember growing up with them, and I remember they kind of put me on a shelf. Even after I told them that I was gay, I wasn't even sure what all that meant myself, but I knew it was different, and I knew that they treated me funny. It was like funny because like I'd want to go places with them, they didn't want me to go.
Mm.
Yeah. Uh, you know, and I couldn't tell if it was because I was a girl or because I showed out on them. I was a better sports person than my brothers. I could do sports better than my brothers. They will never say that, but I knew that I could. I was good at sports. I hold my high school track record.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was just really, I thought, very good. And I could not get my brothers and sisters to accept me, it seemed. They always seemed to not want to listen to me, not want to hear what I had to say. Uh, I, when they had started having children, I was like kind of put on the back burner, kind of like, then I started thinking about, well, maybe it's because I'm gay. And that's why they won't let me be around the kids that much, or and I started feeling funny. I started having funny feelings about that. It didn't make me feel good. And my brother had three or four kids. My oldest brother had 5 or 6 kids. My sister had 3 kids, and all the kids grew up without me getting to love them like I could have had they knew what I was going through
Mm-hmm.
or what you know. I don't know. They just grew up around me without me knowing, you
Right.
know, because I wasn't invited a lot of places that they were. And I had kids too. I had 2 kids. And I tried to make sure that my kids could be around their cousins, you know. Ah, excuse me.
It's all good.
But that was pretty hurtful for me. And I always wanted my kids to love their cousins and be around them when they got older, and my cousins would accept them because I had good kids and I had sweet kids, and I always wanted them to be around their cousins because my cousins were good people, and I just didn't want my kids left out.
Mm-hmm.
So I insisted that they be around their cousins. But I don't know. Over the years, they got closer. The cousins got closer, and my daughter and son, they don't go around them much now. Not because of COVID, but just they're different people.
Sure.
And yeah, and my daughter, she's different. She's more like me,
Mm-hmm.
and she has a wife. And I don't know, Deborah. It was hard, you know, being gay growing up for me. But the acceptance, they seem to accept it, my parents. But my brothers and sisters, they said it was okay, but they didn't treat me like it was okay. So it kind of went like that.
That honestly, that sounds a lot like my family.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you know, my parents kind of the same. It was very non-eventful when I told my
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah.
But then you see over the years that maybe it's a little bit more complicated than it felt at the time. And um, you know, there are parts of my family that I'm closer to, and other parts that I haven't connected to in decades.
Right.
You know,
Right.
yeah, it's a struggle for sure. Gina was talking about that in the chat. Uh, well,
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. You know, it's so many times we're expected to have coming out stories that are really really harsh, and they're like television drama and like
Yeah.
this, and so often it's actually very quiet, but just as hard.
Yeah. It's hard
Yeah.
because you don't know if it's a bad thing or you don't know. You don't know. You just
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
and you don't know why it's you.
Right. Oh yeah. um well,
So that
thank you. Hmm.
no, that's okay. That it just basically trying to get to be accepted when
Hmm.
you find out that you're gay. The
Yeah.
hardest thing is to wonder, will you be accepted?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's no matter how much things progress, coming out and being who you are is scary no matter what.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
um well, I have a couple of questions. It's so there, you have so much history, so much work that you've done, and so many things that you've accomplished, that it was a little bit hard to figure out where to start, because it's more than 90 minutes worth, that's for sure.
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
but I do want to, let's start with, you mentioned being a really good athlete, and
Oh,
you hold some records. You mentioned your Jefferson High School, that was your school.
yes.
You know, you
I
hold records
was on the
there. Hmm.
track. I was on the track team, track and
Right.
field.
Hmm.
Um, and I still hold a record because I was a softball thrower.
Yep.
I could throw a softball pretty darn far. And I won that. And after the year after I won it, they cut it out of track and field.
Hmm.
So I had the record and then they cut it out. So I still hold the
So you
record.
still hold the record. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. After
Wow.
all these years. So
Yeah.
I got that down. And then
Well, see, you broke the record, and they decided no one could live up to it. So, yeah.
I hope that was it. 'Cause I was glad that they stopped it. But
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So tell us about, you are, and as far as I know, still are, well, of course, you're the first Black woman umpire in Portland and in
Yeah.
Oregon.
Yeah.
And you know, when I'm thinking about, you mentioned softball and sports, I'm
Uh,
thinking about umpiring. Umpiring is still a really male dominated field.
right.
And I'm sure it absolutely was at the time. What
Yes.
was it like being a woman, being a Black lesbian woman in Portland, coming up in that arena and
Wow.
accomplishing what you accomplished?
Well, that was in 1967, 68. Uh, there were maybe two or three women, white girls, that were umpires, and I was the only Black one.
Hmm.
And they didn't have any Black teams playing, but they had over 100 and some teams playing. And then when they found out that a Black woman was umping, they decided they'd start some teams. So they had about 5 Black teams that played softball. Okay, well, when upstairs started to hear that there were Black kids now, well, they weren't kids, they were grown-ups,
Mm-hmm.
uh, going to be playing ASA ball, then the white guys, they didn't know what to do with them. They didn't know what to do. That was crazy for me, being an umpire and Black and a woman, and not knowing they couldn't figure out what to do with the Black teams. So they decided that they would, go ahead and let the Black teams play against one another.
Mm.
And then they just put a Black umpire to do the games, to ump the games. So that
Okay.
was me. See, that was me. Okay, well, I knew how to do the games correctly. And some of the teams, they knew how to hit the ball and run. And Black people can really hit the ball and run. But they didn't know it was a batter's box that they couldn't step out of. And they didn't know it was a baseline that they had to stay in. You know, they didn't know how to round the bases. They didn't know that it had all these technical things in baseball. All they thought was that you just hit the ball and run. That's all. And so being an umpire, I was like, wow, these guys don't even know how to do this. And I know they know how to play ball, but they didn't know there were rules to the game.
Mm-hmm.
And now here I am with all the rules, and here we are all together. So I gotta figure out what I can do to make them not look so silly. Cause I call them out when they step out the batter's box. I
Mm-hmm.
call them out when they round them bases too wide, and when they obstruct a player going through one base to another. I'd have to call them out for being obstruction. They didn't understand all that, so tensions would get high.
All right.
Right. Well, when Black people's tensions get high, their anger grows, and they get pretty destructive. They want to mess up things. They're not satisfied. They think somebody's doing them wrong. So what I decided I would do was just go to some of their rehearsals. And if I go to their rehearsals, I could show them. I'd take the book and I'd go to the rehearsals and I'd say, look, you guys are not doing this right. There are rules to this game, and you got to play them right if you're going to be in the association.
Mm-hmm.
And so they say, well, Wanda, can you tell us what we're doing wrong? And I'd say, yeah, I can tell you. I can show you the book. You can look at them, and I can give you a book, and you can study it. And then you guys won't look so silly when you're out there playing. Okay, they got the book. I go out to the games with them, not the games, but practice with them, and show them how to run the bases, and show them the batter's box and how they can't step out of it. And they were like real grateful. They was like, man, we didn't know that all that. I was like, yeah, see, I don't want you guys, I want you guys to be good. Because
Mm-hmm.
you guys can hit the ball out the park. But you can't hit out the park and run all around the park. You got to run on the bases, you know. And so they laughed and stuff, and they were really glad that I could show them how to play the game. But in a big tournament, they wanted me to ump the tournaments because the Black teams done won everything up to the tournaments, and now they got to play these white teams
Okay.
that they're challenging. And when I'd go out to a game that they would end up playing white teams, I would see the umpires scared to death. Yeah, scared to death.
Okay.
Like they call you out. and they be out, some of them, but some of them wasn't so out, you know, that they wouldn't get up and, challenge the umpire, and then the umpire gets scared, and he's backing off of them, and they're all up in his face, you see, and so it kept on happening like that, and the boards of umpires and the teams, they raised so much hell about the black teams till I had to end up umpiring most of the games for the blacks.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's how they end up doing me at first,
Mm-hmm.
And then they liked my umpiring. They liked it very well. And I got commended and I got award for it. And it was I just had a good time, but I didn't want to get in trouble, showing them how to play ball. So I kept that pretty under wraps, that I would
Oh yeah.
go and help them learn how to play the game. So they did real good. They won a lot of tournaments. They won
Nice.
a lot of tournaments. So it was good. I had a good time, and I did that for about 13 years.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then I went on into something else.
Right. Um, so let's talk about for a moment. There's this story, the Billy Webb Elks Lodge in North
Oh,
Portland, which I've heard of and been by and seen, as I'm sure a lot of folks have.
mhm.
And you were pretty instrumental in raising money and really, to my thinking, really bringing the attention to the work that needed to be done. It's a historic building uh,
Mhm.
up on Williams, and
Yeah.
it was pretty. It's an older building. It needed some work. It was definitely um, kind of falling into
Fall
disarray at one
apart.
point, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and you really brought attention to the importance of bringing it back up to snuff, basically, um,
Yeah.
and raising some money to help make that happen. What
Yeah.
I also know, and you kind of mentioned this a little earlier, you also sacrificed a whole lot for that project. It
Yeah.
affected your health. You were pretty done by the end of that project.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
why was that effort so important for you to go that extra mile, so to speak?
Well, to be honest with you, Deborah, at first it wasn't that important to me. Uh, I had a band, and I needed places for them to play, and the Elks was a good place, and I had my band play there a few times. But all of a sudden, one night I'm sleeping, and I wake up because something's waking me up, and I'm like, "What in the world is waking me up?" And it started talking to me, and it said, "You need to get up and do something about that elk." And I'm like, "What? What's really going on?" So you need to get up and start working on getting that elks renovated.
Mm,
And I said, "Renovated? Now what I know about renovation? I'm talking to God, and I don't realize it." And he says, "Do it like that." And so I try to pay no attention. You know how you try to pay something no attention? And he kept on saying it. And he kept on putting it on my mind. Well, I didn't want to do nothing with the elks. I didn't feel like I needed to do nothing with the elks, but he wouldn't let me have any peace. So I said, well, okay. Well, then he said, I was going to Vancouver church, but then he said, there are going to be some people that's going to come into Vancouver Avenue, and it's going to be Elks members. And I want you to count them. It's making me emotional. I want you to count them and just know how many people, if you went and had a meeting, would be on your team about revamping the Elks. And I'm like, what? They try to make it a little clearer to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, okay. So that Sunday I went to church. I went to church, and sure enough, the doors opened and 25 Elk members came in. They just walked as guests, like. And I sat there in the choir stand, and I said, wow, wow, wow. Okay. So then I said, well, I guess I better count them. So I start counting. And out of those 25 Elk members, I knew 19 of them would say yes to me starting up a renovation for the Elks. So I said, wow. So after church was over, I just looked at them and spoke to them, of course, but I was like, wow, why would he put that on me? So I called my godmother of Broadous Entertainment, and I told her what had happened and what I was going to do. So she said, okay, well, I'll go with you when you go to the meeting. I said, well, yeah, I got to set up a meeting. I got to go to a meeting and let these guys know that they have to do something with this Elks. They have to renovate it because it needs renovating. And so she said, okay, I'll go with you. So she went with me to a meeting, and I talked to them, and they end up saying, Wanda, we really need this place renovated. We sure would like to do something. And so I said, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll start having shows. We'll start raising money, and we got to redo this and we got to redo that. And so that's the first time I got an opportunity to look at the Elks, to be able to walk in and walk through it and look and see all that they had. And it was a place where we could have meetings, and kids could go in and have showers. They could have a dance class, and they had rooms for dance classes and study rooms where you could go in and study your Bible if you wanted to. All kinds of things they could do. And I talked to the Elks head man, and he said, yes, Wanda, we can do that. We can start doing something like that. We can start getting you ready to come in here and do some work. And I said, okay, thanks. I appreciate it. And right after that, then I started trying to put shows together and raising money. And after all that, putting shows together and trying to get money, then I got a letter from downtown the city hall, and they had given the Elks $2 million.
Wow.
I had gotten them $2 million for renovation. So they thanked me. They put a dinner on for me and my team, and it was great. It was absolutely great. So it got the renovation, and they start having dances and parties and stuff, and people thank me, and it was real good. It was real good.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's a lot. The city of Portland doesn't part with its money very easy. So that's
Oh no, I know. And for them to do that, I'm telling you, I've just been blessed, totally blessed. And I don't know, blessings just flow for me all the time.
Nice.
And excuse me if I cry, because I'm very emotional, because emotions run in my spirit.
I'm all good
Yeah.
for that.
Okay.
Um, so I have been told that I'm supposed to ask you about the After Hours Club speaking of City Hall, the After
Oh.
Hours Club,
Okay.
and particularly City Hall. And I kind of sense that there's a story there, and
Oh.
I'd like to learn a little bit more about what that's all about.
Wow. Okay. I have to add hours. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I have to go through back in my mind for my years.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I had a 5-bedroom house and big basement. Um, so I decided, well, I'll get people together. That's my thing. I'll put people together. So I'm gonna have after hours. I'm gonna start after hours and get these people having fun, partying. Okay, so my girlfriend at that time, she said, well, we're gonna need some money to redo the basement. And I said, what you mean? She said, well, we have to fix it up, fix a bar, get a bar, we'll build a bar. We have to build a table so we could, have a eating table, a
Mm.
service table. And, you want to have food, don't you? I said, well, yeah. She said, well, we got to have this table, big table, so we can take it in and out. And, we got to do all this. But I know a man that I'll introduce you to. His name is Kaiser. She said, and he'll loan you the money. And I'm thinking, why would he loan me the money?
Mm-hmm.
You know, why would this stranger loan me the money? I don't know this guy. She said, oh, Kaiser's a nice guy. He'll loan it to you. Just tell him what you want to do. And I said, well, okay. So she took me to this club. It was afternoon. It was afternoon, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And she introduced me to Kaiser. I met this big man. He must have weighed 270 pounds. Black, healthy, big. And I met this man, and she ended up telling him who I was and what I wanted to do. And that man said, well, where do you live, young lady? Where do you live? And I said, well, I don't live too far from here. I live, maybe about a half a mile from here. And I live in a 5-bedroom house. And he said, well, is it your house? And I said, no, it's not my house. I said, but I'm renting it. And he said, well, if you do any work in it, he said, are the people going to be mad at you for doing work in the house? And I said, well, they may, but they don't come by. They don't see it. So he said, well, let's go look at it. And I took him to my house. He went down in the basement. He looked at everything. And he said, well, yeah, you could put a bar right here. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, you could get a table. He just set it all up.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, okay, that looks okay. So he reached in his pocket and gave me money right away, $800. I didn't know this man,
Mm-hmm.
but my girlfriend, she knew of him, but she didn't really know him. She just knew of him. And so he gave me the $800 and he said, I have a man that's a contractor and I'll have him come over first thing in the morning.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, oh, that's some bull. That can't be real. No. And he said, so look for him about 9:30. And I said, okay. I got $800 in my hand. I said, okay, like that. And so he said, okay. So he got ready to go. He got ready. Sorry, my thing fell down. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So he got ready to go. And he left. That next morning, 9:30, man knocked on my door. He said his name, and he said, I'm a contractor, and I was sent over by Kaiser. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
And I said, okay, my okay.
There
You
you
got
go.
it?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So he said, I forgot where I was.
Oh, contractor came over.
Oh yeah. And he said, I was sent by Kaiser. And he said, I'd like to see your basement. And I said, oh, okay. I took him down the basement. He looked at everything. I told him what Kaiser had said and what I wanted. And he said, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. And I'm looking at him and he's looking at the structure and he's saying, yeah, I can, yeah. And you want a table? He said, what I can do is that I can build you a table, and I can build you a table in case you want to do some gambling on the table, like a card table, gambling table. I said, no, I don't want to do all that. I ain't trying to have that kind of after hours. I just want to have food so I can bring food down and people can eat and have cocktails. So he said, okay, I can do that. So he said, you got $400? And I said, yeah. So I gave him $400 of Kaiser's 8. And so he took the money and he left. He came back about an hour and a half with materials. And girl, he fixed my after hours up.
Wow.
He fixed the whole thing up. Never asked me for no, I gave him $400 to do it. That $800 was gone. My basement was fixed and I started having after hours. And I had after hours for almost a year and a half before I saw Kaiser again. And when it was funny, because being a lesbian, I said, oh, now what is he gonna want for giving me that $800? So Kaiser came by one day. Kaiser said, I gotta go to Seattle this weekend. And I said, oh, you do? He said, yeah, I want you to go with me. And I said to myself, here it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, here it is. But he had gave me the money. I had spent it. I've been doing it. And so I said, okay, well, no problem. So I got dressed and got ready and we went to Seattle. That night, we went to different clubs. He introduced me. And then when we went back to the place where we were staying, I thought he was, I thought sure he was going to say something, to make me just be so mad. But he didn't. He said, what you standing there for? I said, because I think you're going to ask me something. And he said, I'm not going to ask you nothing. He said, I'm going in here and go to bed. And he said, I would expect you to go to bed too. And he went and closed the door and went into another room.
Wow.
That was it for him. That was all I ever. And then when he took me back to Portland, I never saw Kaiser again.
Wow.
Never saw that man again. I couldn't believe it. But I ran after hours 8 years.
8 years?
8.
Wow. Okay.
And then what had happened was I had other jobs that I was working. I was working for the state. And I was working for Children's Services. Okay, well, I was on a job and this lady, attorney, I think she was either attorney or a cop. I couldn't really tell. But I was taking some kids in for some things they had to deal with. And this cop said to me, how you doing, Wanda? And I looked at her. I didn't know her. She said, you doing all right? I said, yes, I'm doing fine. Thank you. And she said, I just want you to be careful. I said to myself, careful? What she want me to be careful for? But I had to have the hours, see.
Okay.
See, I had to have hours. And I said, what she want me to be careful about? Wow, that's strange. And so I said, okay. So when I went home, I decided I was going to do the after hours differently. I said, because she didn't disturb me. I said, so I'm what I'm going to do. I'm set up membership. I'm gonna set up membership. You have to have a membership card and stuff when you come in late at night. Da da da. And so I started doing that night. I had everything set up for that night. Da 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 da. And about I guess 2:30 that morning, the cops raided me.
Oh, wow.
That very night or that morning. so so anyway, after when they came in the basement, it must have been 70 of them. It just looked like a bunch of cops. But they were real nice cops. They wasn't real rowdy or nothing. They just walked right on in because I never locked the door anyway. So they just walked right in. They were surprised that the door was open, you know. So they walked right in and they looked around, saw the bar and people, they saw things happening. And he said, ma'am, he said, we're going to have to close you down. He said, we have a warrant. And I said, oh, okay, all right. So all the people that worked for me, I had DJ, I had bartenders and floor monitors. So he had us all gather around. And so he had the ones that worked at the bar and the other people, he let them go. They got to leave, go. So they sat in the basement and did all this stuff and asked us all these questions and stuff. And then we had to get handcuffed and go to the paddy wagon. So we all know we're going to jail. So we all sitting in the paddy wagon looking at each other, talking to one another. And that's all we knew. Then we wondered how come we ain't moving. Like, how come we ain't moving? I said, I don't know. We're going to jail, but I don't know why we ain't moving. Then after a while, the back door opened of the paddy wagon. And the police said, is there somebody named Wanda in here? Well, we done already told him and gave us him our names and things already in the basement. But I said, yeah, that's me. And he said, well, excuse me, ma'am. He said, would you mind coming outside with me and telling these people that we're just going to take you downtown and ask you some questions and get some information. And then we're going to let you go back home. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, there are people outside that won't let us go. I said, what? So he said, yeah, like that. And I'm thinking, what the heck? So I said, well, if you take these cuffs off me, I'll go out and talk to him. And he said, okay. He took the cuffs off me. I went outside and there were people all in the streets and in the alley. They wouldn't let the police move the van at all.
Wow.
And I looked at them guys and I was like, hey guys, hey, wait a minute now. Wait, hold up. I said, they gonna take us to jail. He said he's gonna take us to jail, but they said they're not gonna put us in jail. They're just gonna take us, get information, and then let us go. And we'll be able to come back home. And I said, so you guys can let them go. Let them get by. Let them pass. They said, Wanda, are you sure? You sure? You know, because we can take them down now. I said, no, we ain't doing none of that. We ain't doing none of that. Ain't nothing. We ain't doing none of that. And they said, okay, they going to bring you back home. We said, yeah, they going to bring us back home. Don't worry. We'll be all right. And so they let us pass. So I put the cuff back on, went back, got in the van, and then we, after 10 minutes or so, we end up leaving, going to the jailhouse. But after we finished, they brought me home. And that was with that. That's what happened that day, that night. So that's what happened.
Did you ever find out why? Like where that came from, or?
Oh, no. I found out that they had sent, now, like I said, I've been open a long time,
Right.
but they had sent an agent evidently to the after hours one night.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so
Okay.
he had seen that money was being passed, alcohol was being drank, you know. He
Gotcha.
saw the whole thing. So that's what was reported back to them. That's why he said, and we only had the warrant for one night. If you had been closed this night, we wouldn't have been able to pick, you know, to get you. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah. He said the warrant was for this night. I
Wow.
said, okay. But yeah, they brought me back home, told me thank you, bye, and they was gone.
Wow. You know, they make TV shows around stuff like this.
Yeah, but the lady, the detective or whoever she was, when she told me
Mm-hmm.
that was my clue that they was coming.
Right.
And I don't know how she knew me. I have no idea how she knew who I was when she said, "You be careful now."
Interesting.
I was like, who is that? Why would she say that to me? She looked gay. She did look gay, though. I did notice that.
Well, you know, there's a network.
I did notice that she looked gay. And I was like, I wonder what she know about me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But she knew something. But
Right.
that was the story to that one.
Oh yeah, Max says she probably came to after hours at some point.
She could have.
Yeah.
She could have. It was jumping. It was jumping.
Nice.
It was very nice. I was grateful.
Oh
Again,
yeah.
once again. I was grateful to Kaiser. I didn't know that man, but that man came through for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that kind of, you know, you've mentioned doing shows and events and things, and I want to hear a bit about, you have been organizing and hosting, I call them celebratory shows because that's what I've seen so far, for cancer and diabetes survivors.
Oh,
And
yes.
I know for myself, as someone who has both of those in my family,
Uh-huh.
you know, that really jumped out to me.
Mhm.
Where does that come from? What was the inspiration for doing that? And you've been doing it for, now we're looking at, you know, going on 50 years doing these
Yeah,
kinds of
yeah,
things.
yeah. I had a girlfriend, a friend of mine. She taught me all about fishing and going to the mountains and all that kind of stuff, outdoor stuff. And she died on me, and she had cancer, and I
Mm,
didn't know. I didn't know, and I lost her. And I'm a kind of person that I don't try to bug you. I'll give you time. Every time you see me, I'll wait a while before I see you again. And I think I waited too long before I saw her again, because the
mhm.
next time I went to see her, hospice was there. And then I couldn't see her anymore because they wouldn't let me in. And after she died, I felt so bad because I didn't know anything about cancer. I knew people died when they got old, but I had no idea that you could be as young as you were and die of cancer. I was blown away. And so that's how I got started on doing things for people who were survivors of cancer or diabetes. And I started in 1970. And I just kept doing it. And I just celebrated people that were survivors. And I celebrated people that didn't consider themselves a priority.
Mm-hmm.
People that did things for other people without asking for, you know, a reward for it. They did it out of the kindness of their heart. I would reward those people, give them a plaque or something like that. And it was so good. And people were so appreciative to it till I just kept doing it. And I've been doing it since 70. And it was just made me feel good to be able to do that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to give back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got started with that.
Oh, I know it's I've been preparing for this conversation. I've spent quite a bit of time on, and I want to take a moment to make sure that folks go and seek this out. Broadous Entertainment on your YouTube channel has just some amazing documentation of these kinds of events. And I found myself crying. I was like, okay, I know, for one thing, I knew some of the people, which was fascinating to me.
Good.
There's a little bit of a who's who in some of these events.
Mm-hmm.
But for folks who have joined us, who are going to be watching this later, go and check these videos out. Broadest Entertainment on YouTube, because it is the history and cultural significance in these videos is just I can't say enough. It's go and check them out, definitely.
Thank you.
It's just powerful to and that brings up something I've noticed in reading and watching your work. There's this common theme of everything you do is bringing people together in some way, and
Yeah.
creating and or strengthening that community. And
Yeah.
that's something for myself, I super appreciate. And is that intentional on your part? Is that the importance of community is seems to be sort of a core thing here?
Well, I can tell you what made it start being a community
Mm-hmm.
event. I was like in sixth grade. I was in sixth grade. And there was a whole lot of racial discrimination going on in the world. And Martin Luther King was alive at that time. And there was a whole lot of just racial discrimination. Just everywhere you go, people were not appreciating one another.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in the sixth grade and I heard about it. And I knew I was in school and there was a lot of white kids in my school and I ain't never had no problem with them. You know, I just wanted to have fun with everybody that I ran in touch with. So I decided, well, let's do something special. So that night I decided tomorrow I'm going to go to school and I'm going to get all the kids together and we're going to play a game together. That's what we're going to do. We're going to play a game together. So that morning I went to school and at lunchtime I decided, well, this is a good time. This is a good time. So I got out in the field at lunchtime and I called everybody together and I said, hey, you guys, we're going to play a game. They was like, what game we're going to play? Wonder what game we're going to play? We want to play a game. And I said, we're going to play Little Sally Walker. Now, I know everybody done heard of Little Sally Walker. And it goes something like, Little Sally Walker sitting in a saucer. Rise, Sally, rise. Wipe your weeping eyes. Put your hands on your hips. Let your backbone slip. Oh, shake it to the east. Shake it to the west. Shake it to the one that you love the best. Okay? That's how it goes. And so you get in a circle and you pick somebody and they walk around in a circle and you're singing this song. And then they go in the middle of the circle, and they do the little Sally Walker. And then they shake and shake and shake. Okay. So everybody was doing it and they were having fun. And then there was some more school kids, they wanted to do it too. And I was like, okay, we'll put them over here and put them. We just had fun. It was just fun that day. And then I saw my principal, Mr. King, big white guy, 270 pounds, big white dude. Here come Mr. King. I say, oh man, here come Mr. King. Mr. King's gonna see I got all these kids together. We're all having fun, and he'll see that discrimination ain't going on here. Not going on here. Child, Mr. King stood there and he watched us play for, good 10, 15 minutes. And I said, oh, wow, this is cool. This is cool, Mr. King, see this. So then Mr. King said, Wanda. I said, what? He said, come here. So I came up to him and he said, follow me. And I was so happy. I said, oh man, I'm gonna get a prize. I'm gonna get a present. I'm gonna get something. I'm in the 6th grade. I'm thinking I did a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I go with him to the office. So he said, sit right there. So I sat there and I just anxious, just wondering what kind of present I'm gonna get, what kind of surprise I'm gonna get. And I waited and I waited. I sat there and Mr. King came out. He talked to the secretary and then he went back in without saying anything to me. And then I sat there a little while later, and then my daddy came. Oh man, I knew I was getting ready to get a prize now. I just knew I was. A award or something, because this is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought. And then my daddy came. My daddy looked at me while I was sitting in that chair. Then he went in the room with the principal. And then they were in there about 15, 20 minutes. And then the door opened and then Mr. King called me in. So then I came in. I'm still thinking I was going to get this present. And then Mr. King said, Wanda, I'm suspending you. I said, suspending me? I didn't know what that was. What suspended me mean? I said, suspended me? What's that mean? He said, I'm sending you home for 3 days. I said, sending me home for 3 days? What's that for? He said that I was soliciting sex. I said, what? What you mean? What is sex? What are you talking about? My daddy knew what he meant. But it couldn't have been about sex. And my daddy didn't say nothing because my daddy was stern. And my daddy would have said something if I had been doing something like that. My daddy didn't say a word. He just didn't say nothing. And then I said, okay. I said, but I don't think I was doing that. And he said, yes, you were. And so I got up and my daddy got up and we walked out of the office. And I looked at my daddy and my daddy looked at me. And that's the first time my daddy never said a word to me. He didn't say nothing. But I didn't know that I was dealing with discrimination. I had no clue what that was. And I just knew I was trying to put people together and have a good time in the 6th grade. So that's how I got started, putting people together. And it's just been my life. Just the life I lived.
Yeah.
But that was how I got started. with discrimination in in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, it
Um,
was.
that's a, I'd like to pretend I have an answer there, and I don't actually have an answer. That's our history story, you know?
Yes,
Yeah.
I had no idea. My dad had never ever he never said a word to
Mhm.
why. Because when you get suspended, they call your dad. Your dad's you're gonna get a whooping when you get home. That's all you're gonna get. You're gonna get a whooping. But my dad never said not another word about it to me.
Well, yeah, he knew.
He knew
Mhm.
exactly what that principal told him in that office when I wasn't in there.
Yeah.
And my daddy was so disappointed in it that he didn't say nothing to me. He didn't even know how to talk to me and tell me
Mhm.
that there was discrimination in our school. He didn't know. And it was called Highland School then. It wasn't Martin Luther King School. It was Highland School.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So that's another story.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. When I started looking, I'm like, there is no way we're going to talk about everything that we could talk about in this 90 minutes. It is just, so we're going to have to do this again for the part two.
Part two. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
Before we move on from, actually, someone in the audience asked a question about the club, and who, for 8 years, you're talking about a lot of folks at that point.
Yeah.
Who came? Who were your
Oh.
clients? Who came to that?
Oh, 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 oh. Let me think. Let me think. I had a lot of people that I knew from softball.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And there were lots of softball players. And so there were lots of wives and husbands. And I just knew a lot of people and people from my church. I'd see them in the club at that night. It wasn't a club, it was just my house.
Right.
It's set up. And just friends that heard about the after hours and wanted to come and see what it was all about and had a good time and came back and brought somebody the next time. So it was just a lot of people. And then I was on an alley. I was on an alley. So it wasn't like you couldn't see my house if you drove down the street. You
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't see it. And so the people that were parking, there was a parking lot over off from my house so that people could park there and nobody could see their cars.
Oh, gotcha.
So I could get like 50 cars in that parking lot because it was a church parking lot and they didn't have church till that morning.
Right. Okay.
Hope I answered it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Um, when you and you mentioned church, and this kind of leads to my next question. When you and I first spoke, you mentioned the importance of faith in your life. You've mentioned it a few times today as well. And in the work that you do. Sort of it's not an odd question, but as I'm sure you know, faith and especially organized religion is sort of a complex thing for a lot of folks in the LGBTQ
Yeah.
plus community.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Two things. What does your faith mean to you? And how have you navigated your identity as lesbian or gay identified in a faith world that isn't always comfortable with people like us?
Wow. Good
I know it's a big
question.
question, but
First question. Um, what was it?
um, well, let's start with, what does your faith mean to you?
Oh, what it means to me. Well, I grew up knowing that I had to have it because there was so much going on. So I had to know that faith was a spirit and it was a feeling that I had to carry around with me. And it was to treat people right and tell the truth. And those were always things I could do. I had no shame in those things. Uh, so I just kind of carried it with me, and it means everything. I mean, I hope one day to go to heaven. I hope I've done good things. I've done good deeds. Uh, it's very important to love, and the greatest is love. And so I think I got plenty of that. That's what my faith means to me. Next question was what?
Kind of basic. How have you navigated that faith world alongside your identity when, those two things don't always go together very well for a lot of people?
Right. Well, in my church, Vancouver Avenue First Baptist Church, I'll recommend that church to anybody. It's a beautiful church. It's a spirit-felt church. People are very kind. I didn't come out to my church until 2014. Yeah, and they always loved me. I've been a director of the choir. I've led songs. I grew up there. People were always very nice, and I've always been in the straight world mostly. And so when I did come out, I don't know if anybody at that church really actually knew what gay was. I don't know if they even knew any gay people. Uh, so I didn't feel anybody have any funny feelings about that. Only, like I said earlier, only my family is the only time I've ever felt discriminated against that way was them. They don't seem to think they were discriminating me, but they were.
Sure.
Uh, but I just trust God, and I've always trusted God, and it doesn't mean I didn't do bad things sometimes. It didn't mean that. I have done some things I probably didn't have no business doing, but I did them anyway, and I got through them because He watched over me, took care of me, and shielded me and separated me from things that I was going to bop my head against. Uh, so I just like to say to the other gays that are out there, if you don't know God, look Him up. They got all kind of books. But I tell you, the only book that I know that'll give you the strength you need is the Holy Bible. King James. It'll tell you everything, and it'll comfort you while you read it. And something my mom always said to me is that anytime you're in despair and you feeling bad, just get your Bible out and read it. And she guarantee you'll feel better. And if you're at night when you're sleepy and you can't go to sleep, she said, bring your Bible out, read it. She said, because the devil will put you to sleep. And I believe that is a fact. So just have trust in God. Seek Him out, and He'll answer all your needs. And it won't matter that people won't treat you right. Because if you, can you imagine being in this situation where you can't go outside, you can't see your friends, you can't touch them, can't hug nobody. But if you have God, the Spirit of God, you can talk to Him and He will comfort you. People say, I'm very lonely during these times. You're not lonely when God's talking with you. I guarantee. And so just try to lean on him, and he'll help you through most things you're going through. Guaranteed. Next question.
Well, I'm gonna look in the comments. We're on our last few minutes. I want to see if there are any questions. So we talked about customers. Definitely some supportive comments around particularly the incident in, that realization in 6th grade around not having that steal your pride, and that you've held so strongly to being yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Guess my only question, and you've kind of sort of answered it a little bit, but really in thinking about everyone who's here with us today,
Mm-hmm.
and including folks listening in the future, what do you want folks to take away most from our conversation? I know that's a broad question, and but really, what do you want folks to take away from hearing at least a small part of your story?
Just know that we're all in this together. The community we live in is a community that none of us know, but we're all trying to know. We're trying to get smarter in it.
Mm-hmm.
But just keep living, and things will get brighter, and the road will be easier, hopefully. And people will start to accept things a little better than they are, because we're here to stay and we ain't going nowhere. So we better learn to get along and enjoy and love one another, because that's all we got.
True that. Does anyone, I want to open it up for a couple of minutes. Does anyone have any questions for Wanda that we haven't touched on, or and there's a lot that hasn't been touched on, or maybe something a little bit more detail? We have a message from Joe Ellen. Just, you are a marvel, generous spirit of love. Continue. They also receive a lot of comfort from Spirit. Continue to be the bright light that no one can extinguish.
Thank you.
And honestly, I think that's my takeaway as well. That's the because we are all here and we're not going anywhere. And there's only one earth, there's only one place, and we're all in it.
Right.
So I definitely appreciate that myself.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I wanted to tell you, I appreciate you calling me for this interview. This was something I would never expect, but I'm very delighted. I thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad that let's bring up Margaret Ann, who is the doer of all things, I think.
Right, right.
Connecting us and making this happen. This has been an exciting time. Let's see. But folks are definitely appreciative of Deb. Is glad to have had the opportunity to hear your story. Oh, Carrie Ann has, now we're going to have a deep question. How has, well, this could go on. This could be a long conversation. How has racism changed since the 60s? How in how it's, like, how's that experience changed?
How has what?
Racism, discrimination.
How has racism changed since early until now, or since from the 6th grade till now?
Oh, from the 60s, basically. From your, from your youth to where we are now.
Okay. I'm going to give you the best answer and the most honest answer that I can.
Sure.
How have things changed from the 60s from in racial equality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, to be honest with whomever is asking that question, there's not much change. There's not much change, not for the Black people. No, I must say, I'd like to say something else,
Sure.
but I can't. There's no change. From the 60s to the 2021s. It may even be worse in some places than it was, but it sure ain't no lighter. We have had so much killing of Black men in America, and it's just uncalled for, totally. And I don't think I have a prejudice bone in my body, but I'll tell you, I don't like it where it sits right now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't know what I can do to change it other than be the person that I am still yet today. But people have got to get a hold of this and look at it for what it is and see the truth in it. Is the only way we can change it is to see the truth in it.
I second that. Looking to see if there are any more. I'm honestly, I'm tempted to, well, Max actually wants to know a little bit more about your band. You mentioned it early on and we just kind
Oh
of
yeah.
glazed past it.
Okay.
Uh,
Well, I had a band called Soul Syndicate. There was 5 of us, and we played R&B, jazz, and we played around the city. In after hours, we played clubs. Um, there were women and men in it. I had a saxophone was a woman. Guitars were guys. Uh, I was a vocal, and I had a keyboard player, which was a woman, and saxophone player was a woman. And we played for 5 years together, and then we broke up. And some of them moved out of town, and I never put a band back together again after that.
Gotcha. Do you have any recordings at all?
No, I
No?
don't. No.
Okay. I love the name. Yeah, so does Max.
Thanks.
Well, I think I could keep asking questions and then we'll be here for the rest of the evening and people are like, that's only 90 minutes. I really appreciate your time and what you've done in this community and continue to do, and the example that you set for the rest of us in what it means to be in community and to build community and to hold each other up. I'm really honored to meet you, even if it's only virtual at this point. And I don't know, let's do this again so that we can get the rest of the story.
Ah, oh, I love it. I love it. Whatever you decide.
Yeah, see, Deb wants to know if there's going to be a part 2. We might have to make that happen, I think. Thank you everyone for coming and for your questions and your comments and for being part of this inaugural event. And thank you again, Wanda, for being here and sharing your story and
Thank you.
sharing yourself with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone have a good night.